All right, good evening, everybody. Those of you who are here, welcome. I am David, and welcome to A Thousand Shimmering Lights. This is the only live YouTube planetarium Q&A show that I know of, and the only one where you get to be the planetarium director because your questions and topics drive the discussion. So, um, as we proceed tonight, just remember that this is all about whatever you guys are interested in talking about. I do have a couple of things that I can talk about that I can bring up, so we have something to go off of. But I really would like for you guys to start asking questions and things in the chat and really drive that discussion. So before we begin, I want to start as always by mentioning that I am the membership director for the Northeast Florida Astronomical Society, also known as NEFAS. Our website is nefas.org. That is for Northeast Florida Astronomical Society.org. Our astronomy club is the astronomy club here in Jacksonville, Florida, in the greater Jacksonville area. So if you live in Jacksonville, Florida, or the greater Jacksonville area, and you are interested in the science of astronomy or the hobby of astronomy, definitely check us out. If you have a telescope or you're an astronomer, or you just want to become a part of what we do, or even just support what we do financially, you can become a member of the club. On our website, we have a membership pull down menu here, and you can hit Join NEFAS. Also, if you're watching this and you're a club member who needs to renew your membership, this is also where you would go and you would just click Renew Membership. But if you're joining, you'd click New Membership, you'd fill all this out, and our membership rates are as follows. Remember, these are annual rates, so this is once per year. For students and seniors over 55 years old, it's $20. For a regular old individual, it's $40. For a family, it's 50, and what that means is any two adults and any children they happen to be in charge of. For $75, you can be a benefactor of the club. You don't get anything extra other than we mention you in our monthly newsletter. It's just something for people who really like what we do and they just want to give more, but don't feel like you have to do it or you're going to get some special bells and whistles or anything for doing it. It's just some people said, hey, I want to give more, so we created a higher level so they could do that. And then the corporate sponsorship for $250 if you run a business and you want us to advertise in our monthly newsletter that goes to all of our club members for what it's worth. But most people, like I said, most people just do the individual level or the family level or student or senior, depending on if you qualify. If you are not interested in becoming a member of the club, that's cool. If you just want to get involved in some of the stuff we're doing, you can check out our calendar on our website at nefas.org. And let's talk a little bit about some of the upcoming events this month. This Saturday is one of our two possible dark sky observing sessions. So every month on the Fridays and Saturdays closest to last quarter and new moon are when we tend to go to our dark sky observing location out in the Osceola State Forest that we call the Swamp. It's not really a swamp, it's actually just a clearing around an artificial pond that they use to dip the bucket to put out the forest fires. We can use it when they're not using it, and I always joke and say that if they ever do need it, we're not going to be there. As everyone knows, forest fires are notoriously terrible observing conditions, so we would typically be elsewhere. Um, we do this, like I said, about every Friday or Saturday, closest to last quarter or new moon. But for people who have never been before, the Saturdays associated with those two lunar phases are sort of more official, and I send out a go no go based on weather to all of our club members, and I arrange to meet people at a Firehouse Subs in McClenny. So if you want to come join us at our dark sky location and you've never been before, I highly recommend meeting me at the Firehouse Subs in McClenny and then following me out to the location. I give a brief overview of some of the safety and light discipline guidelines that we follow while we're out there, and then we head out there. Some things to keep in mind about the dark sky observing, if you are interested in that, is that those are not outreach sessions. That doesn't mean they're not open to the public, or that doesn't mean they're not a friendly environment, or that we don't welcome people to come and join us. It just means that everybody who's there and has brought their own telescope did not bring their telescope for the express purpose of sharing it with the general public like we do in our outreach sessions. These sessions, these dark sky observing sessions, are inwardly focused. They're things we do for ourselves. And our club members are out there working on their own personal observations. A lot of us are trying to complete certain lists, like the Messier list or the Caldwell list, or some people are out there doing astrophotography and that kind of thing. That said, you will find that people are really friendly, and you would not be surprising if you get invited to look through an eyepiece. But just expect that that's not the purpose of this observing session. It's really for us to get out and observe. But I do still highly recommend it. You can get out under a nice dark sky. You can see the Milky Way, which I think everybody, every last man, woman, and child on this planet Earth should see the Milky Way at least once in your life. And again, a great way to do that is to join us at one of these sessions. Another couple things to bear in mind: it is a wild place, so there is wildlife out there, and we do have safety precautions that we follow. We have never had an incident with somebody being harmed by wildlife at the swamp, and I intend to keep it that way. The other thing to bear in mind is it is remote. We have no facilities out there, no electricity other than that which you bring with a generator or battery or something. It is the middle of the woods, and we usually don't even have cell service. And it is quite a distance from civilization, so if you break down out there, it is a walk, which is why we always advocate going as a group. And by a group, we don't mean load a bunch of people into one car. We mean at least two cars. We have the two-car rule in our club because of the fact that if one person breaks down, the other they can go for help, because it is fairly remote, and it is also home to the Florida State swamp bird, which is to say the giant mosquito. Those guys that'll swoop down and carry off your chihuahua, they live out there, so bring something with DEET. And we observe light discipline, I mentioned, which is basically we don't use any bright white lights because those ruin your dark adaptation where your pupil opens up and you can see better at night. We want to preserve that while we're observing, so we stick with only dull red lights. I always bring red masking tape that can be used to convert a normal flashlight into a light discipline compliant flashlight for our guests as well. And then other than that, though, like I said, it's a great time, and we definitely welcome people, so I'm not trying to put anybody off of it, but I just want people to have a realistic expectation of what those sessions are like. Also coming up, though, that's the rest of this month. That's really the only things we've got going on for the rest of the month of June. In July, let's take a quick look at July. July 9th, we have our Hannah Park Stargaze. So if everything I was just saying about our dark sky observing sessions sounded too inwardly focused and too, not outreach, not public, not, too remote, that kind of thing, Hannah Park is what you're wanting to go to instead. Hannah Park is the exact opposite. It is in a public location, easily accessed, great bathroom facilities, beach access, so you can go hang out on the beach while you wait for it to get dark. And it's just a big parking lot. We get together in Lot 8 at Hannah Park, and we don't charge anything. The park charges $5 for admission. That's just the park, but they charge $5 per car, so do load up in one car if you're going to go to Hannah Park. And come out and join us, man. I take a laser pointer and I do a tour of the sky, kind of like what I do on this channel, except sort of abbreviated and more structured. I point out the constellations, I tell some of the myths, I crack a couple jokes. It's usually a good time. People really seem to like it. And then we have all of our club members bringing telescopes, and at Hannah Park, those telescopes are not there for us. They are there for you. They are there to show you the moon, the planets, other galaxies, nebulae, whatever. So Hannah Park is definitely a fun time. It's a great time to bring your kids. So I highly recommend it. The only thing is, the park closes the gate at 7:30, and that will shift based on daylight savings. So I try to always tell people whether it's going to be 5:30 or 7:30. It's 7:30 right now. And you have to be in by then. You can leave, but you can't get back in because the exit gate is automated and it won't let you back in. But once you're in the park, hang out till sundown, and we will check out all kinds of cool stuff. If you have a telescope and you want to learn more about how to use it, if you're new to the hobby and you want some pointers, some tips, help setting up, help understanding your eyepieces, that kind of thing, come to Hannah Park and show up early. I usually get there early. Some other club members like to get there early, and we love helping people with that kind of thing. And showing up a little bit early to Hannah Park is a great way to get some help from astronomers who have been doing this for years and can teach you a lot about how to use your equipment and help you set up. A lot of people will vouch for that. There's a lot of people who have come to Hannah Park, and I've helped them out. Other club members have helped them out. And then you get to enjoy the show that night. Hannah Park is also part of our NEFIS never cancels policy. What that means is I don't care how bad the weather is. The dark sky observing sessions are, they're not outreach. So we cancel those based on weather because there's no point. But for Hannah Park, we never cancel no matter how bad the weather because people do show up no matter what we do. So it's literally that we've had sessions where it's been raining and we all gather under a pavilion and I just start answering questions about space. No matter what, we are there at Hannah and we are talking about and learning about the universe. So you can always count on us being there. Some other really cool events coming up in July. I know it took a while talking about Hannah, but it's like our big thing. I really want to promote it. Our board of directors meeting is coming up on July 11th. That is open to board members and club members who are active. They've paid their dues. Club members are welcome to come and we, you can make yourself heard and suggest things and whatever and see how the sausage is made. That Wednesday is going to be a full moon. The 15th, July 15th, is our next general meeting. Actually, no, sorry. We don't have, because a lot of people leave on vacation in July and August, we actually skip the general meeting those months. So no general meeting in July. July 16th, we are going to be at the Mosh. Again, I know not all these viewers live in the Jacksonville area, but for those of you who do, we're going to be at the Museum of Science and History. Mike's here. Hey, what's up? Matt is already asking about the Bode's Void. We will definitely talk about that. I've mentioned it in a previous episode, but I really don't mind repeating myself on these shows because the whole idea is this is just a hangout. So whatever you want to talk about, we can talk about it. Bode's Void is actually a really interesting subject and very misunderstood, I feel. So, sorry, I was just checking the chat in case we had any questions. So, yeah, the 16th of July, we're going to be at the Mosh. That's the Museum of Science and History in Jacksonville for an event called Rock the Moon. We've done a few of these before, and I got to tell you guys, they're awesome. I'm obviously I'm going to promote everything we do. I'm promoting the club, but I really do mean these Rock the Moon events are cool. There's a local band called Skyview, and they love the space program, and they love space like I love space. One of these days, I'm going to not volunteer for the event so I can actually attend the show, but they put on a concert in the planetarium, live concert. They got the drums and everything. I mean, it's not a recording. They're there. It's a concert in the planetarium. And then the planetarium shows imagery behind them on the dome related to what they're singing about. So they've got a song about Voyager, for example, and they're putting up images of the Voyager spacecraft and pictures that the Voyager took. They got a song about, of course, the Apollo 11 moon landing. They're putting up images from Apollo 11. They've got songs about the Apollo. I think they have a sort of a somber one about the Apollo 1 fire. They got images to that. In the sort of lobby area outside the planetarium, they have a cash bar, where they have themed cocktails that you can enjoy. We set up inside the building so people can ask us about our equipment on their way in, and then once the show starts, we head downstairs, set up all our telescopes in the parking lot, and again, kind of like with Hannah Park, come look through the telescopes, check out the moon and whatever. So that event on the 16th, the Mosh I think is charging $25, but honestly, it's a full-blown rock concert, so $25, man, you can't beat it. Come enjoy a sweet rock concert and themed cocktails. That's cash bar. You gotta pay for those too, obviously. And come look at stuff with us after you've had a couple cocktails. Then everything is gonna look really cool through the telescope. But it's a really fun time. I highly recommend it. And then, of course, on the 21st of July is going to be my next live stream. And I'll conclude it there because I'll talk about these things coming up once we get there. So that's everything coming up over the course between now and the next live stream. Last time I mentioned our general meeting in June, man, I forgot. I came home from work. I hopped on, I started playing video games. It's not even like I did anything important. And then the next day, I'm seeing pictures from the general meeting, and I'm like, son of a gun, we had the dude here talking about relativity. I really wanted to hear about that because it's really cool. He's a physics professor. He knows what he's talking about, and I, pardon the pun, spaced on it. Um, and I'm kicking myself because it actually was really cool. People were saying, I've heard through the grapevine, people were saying it was actually a really good presentation, and I missed out on it. Shucks, man. But and then we're not gonna have one in July. What are you gonna do? All right, so I'm gonna check the chat real fast. Nina from work says hi. What's up, Nina? Glad you could make the live stream tonight. Thanks again for inviting me over to enjoy that food. We've got Cooper here tonight. We got Matt and we got Mike. So we got a lot of people here already. That's awesome. And I guess we'll go ahead and get into it. Oh, real fast, one thing I want to say, I keep mentioning the Jacksonville area and NEFAS, which is really the Jacksonville Club. I do want to quickly shout out our friends, the Ancient City Astronomy Club, as well. If you live in the St. Augustine area, definitely check them out. We don't try to snipe any members from them or anything. They're a great group of guys, and a lot of us are actually members of both. Mike in the chat, for example, is a member of both clubs. I'm a member of both clubs. So if you live in the St. Augustine area, check out Ancient City Astronomy Club. Unfortunately, I don't know if their website is back up and running. I know there was some issues with the site, or I'd show it to you. I'll have to check, but another great one to check out. So we already have a question in the chat, and I always encourage questions, so I'm feeling a little bit like a hypocrite, but I'm going to pin that question for now because I do want to start off doing what I usually do, which is I'm going to talk about some of the objects that are in the sky tonight, what you can expect to see, and the constellations and that kind of thing. I do want to mention that the software that I use, which, did I lose connection to it? Give me a second. Technical difficulties. This is how you know this is a live stream, guys. As you never know when something's gonna break right when I need it. Okay. There we go. Okay. And then we'll put that behind me. Load it up a little bit. Like that. And lock it down. Okay. Sorry about that. We're back. So this is Stellarium Web. And oh man, I'm watching the analytics. We lost a couple people with that. Nah, I'm kidding. I'm sure they'll be back. This is the Stellarium Web software that I use to show the constellations and the things that are in the night sky. It's free planetarium software, so you can go online and check out Stellarium. There's a downloadable version, which is free, and then there's a web-based client called Stellarium Web, which is also free. So you can do either one. I actually like the downloaded one a little bit better, but it doesn't seem to stream well, so I use Stellarium Web for the streams. But they're both really good. And what's cool is it's made by and for astronomers. So if I start to zoom in here, it will actually show you where various objects are. There's a search feature, and look how detailed it's got the actual locations of this many stars programmed into it. Some things to note about it, like most planetarium software, it represents the brightness of a star by the size of the dot. So we can tell that Vega, for example, is an incredibly bright star because it's a really big dot, right? The other thing to bear in mind is I have a little date and time down here so I can time travel. So as we are learning tonight, you don't have to keep your questions limited to the current season. We could talk about the winter, spring, summer, or fall, whatever you want to talk about. And am I losing the video. You guys let me know if I'm losing the stream quality here. Because now YouTube is saying that the video bitrate is too slow. Give me a quick second here. Might be my own computer. Hold on. Okay, Cooper says it's good now. Okay, cool. Y'all let me know. I'm still going to check my task manager because it definitely looks like something's eating up all of my CPU right now. What the heck? Right. And that's starting to come back down. That's good. For a second there, literally task manager said CPU 100%. That's not good. You don't want your CPU to max out like that. Okay, I think we've recovered a little bit from whatever the heck that was. So, it says webcam's not working well, though. Honestly, the webcam is probably the least important part of this. Also, let me know if the audio quality is improved. A couple people have mentioned that in the last couple of live streams, I sounded sort of metallic and low quality. And I think I figured it out today that I was unknowingly using the built-in microphone in my webcam rather than this microphone. So this was like decorative on the last couple live streams. So hopefully I'm sounding way better now than I did a couple live streams ago. With the technical difficulties out of the way, though, let me go ahead and get back to the live stream. I do want to remind everybody that as I talk about the constellations and the things in the sky tonight, definitely drop a question in the chat, take part in the discussion. And I do always say there is no such thing as a dumb question. Any honestly asked question is a good question, right? If there's something you don't know and you want to know, ask the question and then you'll know, right? I know not everybody is able to participate in the YouTube chat. If you have any means of getting a hold of me, in fact, let me grab my phone. Right, for those of you who know me personally, or who saw me posting this on Facebook or anything, if you have some way to send me a message on Facebook or text me or whatever, feel free to do that and send me a question, and I'm going to try and pay attention to those other sources as well. And now, with all the technical crap out of the way, let's get back to the show. I will say I'm going to come back around to this idea of no such thing as a dumb question, because there is such a thing as just being obstinate, right? Like asking like gotcha questions to try and, prove that the earth is flat or whatever. That's different. But if you genuinely are trying to learn, all questions are good questions. This is a no judgment YouTube channel. This is not, astronomy, class, graduate level, whatever. This is, I want to learn. So ask whatever. And a lot of times what you may think is a weird or a dumb question has a really cool and interesting answer. So definitely drop that stuff. If you don't have a question specifically, you can also just drop a topic the way Matt did, where he put in the chat, he just said, hey, let's talk about the Booty's Void, right? Didn't have a question about it, just wants to talk about it, we'll talk about it. All right. And also just say hi in the chat. It's hard for me to tell how many people are watching, and if you say hi, it helps me feel like I'm not just talking to the wall. All right, now with all that out of the way, let's talk about tonight's sky. One of the things you'll notice here in the software, this is the eastern direction. So one thing that Stellarium does is it fast forwards to nighttime. This is actually showing right now, though, actually, I think. Let me see here. No, sorry, this is showing 9 o'clock. This is showing about like an hour ago. This would be close to now, right? So it's going to fast forward to nighttime. But this is about 9 o'clock, about 10 o'clock, really, because it's like 9:50 p.m. And here we see that in the eastern sky, what we call the summer triangle is already getting low. The summer triangle is Vega, Altair, and Deneb. Three bright three bright stars whose appearance in the sky is most associated with the summertime. Although a lot of times when we say that this is a summer constellation or a fall constellation, you can actually see those constellations over a wide stretch of time. You just have to get up a little early or stay up a little late, or just watch right as the sun is setting and that kind of thing. So when we say it's summer, we just mean that it's very well placed in the summer. It's very easy to see in the summertime. But if you stayed up all night long, you would see most of the constellations. But anyway, here we see that the summer triangle is getting low in the sky, so that's starting to leave us behind. We're starting to say goodbye to that, which makes sense because we are approaching the fall, right? The summer is coming to a close. We are approaching the fall. The summer triangle is going to go away, and constellations associated with the fall and the winter are going to start to grace our skies. But if we do find the summer triangle, I'm going to quickly point out by drawing in the lines that those three stars indicate the locations of three constellations. Deneb is the tip of the tail feathers of Cygnus the Swan. Got one wing coming out that way, another wing going that way. Tail feathers of Deneb, all the way out to this star called Albireo. The software calls it Gaia DR2026. But the common name of this star is Albireo. That forms the beak of the swan. Vega is a part of this constellation called Lyra the Harp. I'm not really sure how it's supposed to look like a harp, but it is a parallelogram. And if I add the artwork, I guess there's the harp. That's the other thing about this software. I can add and remove the lines on the artwork whenever I want. Altair, these three stars form the head and beak, the body and one wing, the other wing, and the tail feathers of Aquila the eagle. Now, if we move to the opposite side of the sky to the west, we can see what is going to be coming up for us, what's going to be joining our skies. Here we see Cancer rising in the west. Leo, very well placed. We are definitely in Leo territory. In fact, if you look, Leo and Virgo are already near the zenith, which is the uppermost point of the sky, right as nightfall is really on us at about 9 o'clock tonight. There's a lot of really cool stuff we can talk about in the Leo-Virgo part of the sky. This is where something called the Virgo cluster lives, which is to say this entire piece of sky is absolutely silly with galaxies. There's an unbelievable number of galaxies over here. Also coming up in this part of the sky, we've got Cancer, like I mentioned. But if I start to time travel a little bit by an hour... You know what? I've got everything backwards. I'm sorry. This stuff is rising in the east because it is still summertime. This is the stuff that's going away, right? So let me reverse everything I just said. We are not losing the summer triangle. Other way around, we are gaining the summer triangle. It's becoming more prominent. I don't know why I thought it was later in the year. But as we move into the night, the summer triangle is going to move up into the sky. And this is looking about midnight right here. And here we see it's going to be pretty much directly overhead. So scratch what I was saying about this stuff going away. It's the other way around. Why do you guys even watch my show? I clearly don't know what I'm talking about. Now, some really cool things that we can see. Really cool things we can see in this piece of sky. There are some really good nebulae over here. So here in Lyra, about halfway between the stars Sheliak and Sulafat, we have the Ring Nebula, right? Over here by Cygnus, we have the North American Nebula, which is what this circle represents right here. If we zoom in, this nebula kind of looks like, we got Florida here, we got Mexico into South Central America here, right? Canada, presumably up here someplace, right? So that's why we call it the North American Nebula. We also have a really good nebula over here called the Veil Nebula. In previous episodes of the show, I've mentioned that this is the channel logo, this piece over here. That is no longer true. I've changed my channel logo to a painting I made of Messier 83, which maybe I'll show you guys that. And then right about, let's see here. The trick I use to find it is I take Sadr and Epsilon Cygni and Albireo, and I imagine I'm going to complete the rectangle. So about here-ish Oh, look at that. And son of a gun, I grabbed it. Messier 27. This is the Dumbbell Nebula. Unfortunately, a lot of the images in the free Stellarium Web version are kind of blown out, low quality. But the good news is I like to use Wikimedia Commons for my visual aids, which is also acting up on me. Why? Why? Oh, why? Give me another second, guys. We are going to get there. Cool. All right. And I'm just going to blow this up. Do. All right. Move that behind the camera. Lock it down. There we go. All right. I use Wikimedia Commons for my visuals. Man, this is not boding well, all this grinding and chugging of the gears here. Okay. So if I go to Dumbbell Nebula, not sure if I spelled that right. We could see a better picture of it here. So any object we want to look at, I can always find us a better picture than the Stellarium has, and bring that up on the screen for you guys. So that's what's going on over here by the summer triangle. Yeah, I'm being told the stream is very laggy again. I know, guys. I am sorry about that. I don't know why it's doing that right now, but I'm just gonna try my best, man. But you guys keep letting me know. And it looks like some viewers dropped off as well, but they're coming back. I think it's my internet connection. Who knows, man? You know what I'm going to do real fast? I'm just going to message my roommate real fast and just double check that nobody's doing anything to eat up the bandwidth. But no, because see, the problem is some of the programs on my own computer are lagging. So I think it's just me. I don't actually think it's my connection. But we'll just play it by ear, I guess. Okay, so getting back to this piece of sky. Another thing that's going to be in the sky tonight, if you wait a little bit longer, Pegasus should start to come up around midnight, but we still have to get much later in the year for Pegasus to be more prominent, which means that the Andromeda Galaxy, unfortunately, not really going to be an option tonight. But some other good things to look at. We could always take a nice look to the south and see if our good friends Sagittarius and Scorpius are rising. So Sagittarius is the Centaur, and I was telling I've been training some new associates where I work, and I was telling them how Sagittarius is supposed to be a centaur with a bow and arrow, but for all the world, it looks like a teapot to me. I mean, look at this. Here is the pot. Got the handle coming out this way. Got the spout coming out this way. It's even got a lid. Sagittarius is a teapot, for sure. And, okay, for a second there, it looked like we were getting another hiccup. So Sagittarius looks like a teapot. Near to Sagittarius is Scorpius. The easiest way to find Scorpius is to find Antares. It's red. And you'll see this chain of 3 stars here, here, and here. And a second chain here, here, and here. You get sort of like one curve and the other curve like that. That's the easiest way I've found to find Scorpius. And then once you find that, this curve that has Antares, you can keep going. And you will soon discover this pattern of bright stars that comes down, wraps around, and then stings out to here. Sort of kind of comes around and then like that. That is the tail and stinger of the scorpion, because this is Scorpius the scorpion. This piece of sky has a lot going for it. First of all, if you like globular clusters, we got some of those for you. We've got Messier 19, we got Messier 4. What is a globular cluster? That's a great question you could put in the chat if you're interested, but basically it's a ton of stars all packed in together. right? So open clusters are sort of like loose associations of stars, and globular clusters look like a snowball or like a swarm of bees, except the bees are stars. There's just so many; it's absolutely mind blowing. Some globulars are a little looser than others, but for the most part, they're thick, dense. Through a telescope, they just look like blurry because of all the stars. Um, we also have a couple of really cool open clusters over here, Messier 6 and 7. There's 6, there's 7. 7 is known as Ptolemy's cluster. 6 is called the butterfly cluster, and the reason why is because this pattern of stars looks vaguely like a butterfly. You got them coming out here, out there, and then what looks like 2 and 10A. Now, the software is putting a lot of stars in here, but through an amateur telescope, the butterfly is a little clearer. And then Ptolemy's cluster, I guess Ptolemy discovered this cluster. I don't know what to tell you. But it's another really cool cluster with some bright stars in it. What's really cool, though, is if we follow the steam coming out of the teapot that is Sagittarius, we hit all kinds of cool stuff. We've got Messier 8, the Lagoon Nebula, which looks terrible here. Let me bring it up in my visuals. Because it's actually a really cool looking nebula. Lagoon Nebula. Right? Excuse me, right? This is very neat. This picture really does it justice. Where you get this sort of a spherical glowy patch and then like a bright thing around it, right? So you'll see this bright area, and then you'll see this second bright area wrapping around it. The nice little cluster of stars in there as well. Very nice, even through an amateur telescope. And if we keep going, we have M20. That's the Trifid Nebula. Another good nebula. M21 is a nice cluster. 23, another cluster over here. These M numbers, we can talk about what that is. It's called the Messier list. M24 is something called the Sagittarius star cloud. It's actually a gap in the interstellar dust that lets us see more stars than we normally would. So it looks like there's just a sea of stars there. Swan Nebula is really cool. It really looks like a swan swimming across the surface of a lake. 16, the Eagle Nebula, another great nebula, right? All sort of flowing out of the steam coming out of the teapot that is Sagittarius. Also nearby, though a little bit more difficult to spot, this is going to require a little practice, but if you're new to the hobby and you want to get some practice in, right, this is a more challenging constellation to go after. Not too bad, but just it's not as immediately obvious as the teapot, is the constellation Ophiuchus. You may have heard some people say Ophiuchus should be the 13th star sign because the sun does spend some time in Ophiuchus. Personally, I don't care what the star signs are because I think it's all nonsense, but Ophiuchus actually does lie along the ecliptic, and the sun does spend some time in an Ophiuchus, so yeah, sure. But if you find Ophiuchus, there's some cool globulars in here. And then once you've found Ophiuchus and Sagittarius, you can use those to locate Scutum. Scutum, I'm going to remove the lines to show you it's not easy to find either. But what you're basically looking for is these two stars, and then these two stars sort of on either side forming like this long spindle shape. And then right here, nope, that's not it. Hold on, what am I looking for? Zoom in a little bit. Is this it? No? Hold on, technical difficulties. Here it is. Messier 11, the Wild Duck Cluster. This is cool. The software is just making it look all blown out. The Wild Duck Cluster, and if you Google images of it, you're going to be like, wow, it's like a really dense cluster. That's kind of neat. But if you look at it through an amateur telescope, where it's not quite so awash with stars like you would get in an image, the Wild Duck Cluster has some really interesting structure going on. That's why I really like it. It's very easy. Like when you first look at it through a telescope, you're just going to go, wow, it's a lot of stars. But if you pause and you take the time to sit and really look at it and try to like make notes or describe it or sketch it or something like that, you'll start to tease out all the details, and you'll start to see that there are these sort of chains of stars going these different directions, like loops and sort of gaps within it. It has a lot of really cool structure that is easy to glance past if you don't stop and take your time with it, but is a really rewarding cluster if you do spend some time really appreciating it. Um, Now I'm gonna have that song stuck in my head. Oh man, now I've got to find out what song I accidentally referenced that he's talking about. So this is some of the stuff. Whoa, zoomed out really far. This is some of the stuff you can see in the summer sky. Now this right here, C 2017 Kilo 2 Pan Stars. What is that? That's a comet. Right now it is 7.57 magnitude. That's not bad. So magnitude measures the brightness of an object. Stars that are naked eye visible range from 1 to about 6 magnitude, where the lower the number, the brighter the object. With a decent telescope, you can drive that down as low as like 8, 9, or 10, or even as low as 11, 12, 13 if you've got a really nice telescope in a really dark sky. Now, there's a bit more that goes into magnitude than that because extended objects like galaxies and nebulae that are more spread out, the magnitude can be a little misleading. Whereas more dense objects, that magnitude is more concentrated. So just because two things have the same magnitude doesn't mean they're as equally visible. But nonetheless, with a comet, a 7.57 magnitude is not bad. It's going to look like a bit of a smudge in the eyepiece, but Pan-STARRS, this one may be one worth watching. Comets, as we say, are like cats. They have tails, and they do precisely what they want to do. Meaning that you never know what a comet's going to do, right? You might think it's going to get nice and bright, and then it just doesn't. Or you might think it's going to be kind of dim, and then suddenly, oh, it's bright. I just realized why the stream is lagging. Windows has installed an update and needs to restart. I really, really wish Windows would go back to the days of asking me to download the update, because I'm going to do it. And I get it. Windows is like, it's a security thing, right? If you don't update your computer, you're exposed to danger. But you can't just start downloading this thing in the middle of my live stream, man. I got a YouTube channel to run. So we figured it out, guys. That's why my stream is lousy. My computer has this terrible habit of waiting until I'm doing something important to download a new Windows update. So nothing I can really do about that. We're just going to try our best because I'm not rescheduling the stream because Windows. Oh, Matt said the teapot. Right, because I said here's the teapot. It's got a handle and a spout. Man, I really hope I'm watching right now in the preview, and I'm lagging hard, but I really hope you guys are at least getting the audio and at least seeing what's going on in Stellarium, even if my webcam isn't looking great. So that's some of the stuff to look at in this piece of sky. And then, as always, we have the circumpolar constellations that I'll briefly touch on because I do want to leave some time to actually talk about stuff. The circumpolar constellations, I'll just really quickly remind you guys. The Big Dipper is part of a constellation called Ursa Major. It's made of some really bright stars, so it's really easy to spot the Dipper part, right? You can easily see these are all really big dots. Then you can take the edge of the ball and extend it out and find this star right here. That is Polaris. Polaris is the tip of the tail of Ursa Minor. Usually you'll see Polaris, and then you'll see these two out here, Kokov and Furcad. The rest of these stars in Ursa Minor are rather faint. As you can see, they're rather small dots. But that is Ursa Minor, also called the Little Dipper. But usually you can just infer it because it's going to be halfway between Polaris and these two stars. Unfortunately, you tend to have to get somewhere fairly dark to see the Little Dipper. But the Big Dipper is really good at just cutting right through light pollution. A lot of people think you just can't see anything because of light pollution, but actually you'd be surprised if you take the time to look up how much you'll see. And the Big Dipper is one of those constellations. I've literally shown it to people from downtown Jacksonville. Similarly, Cassiopeia, this big M shape, although it's a little low right now. These are called the circumpolar constellations because they are around Polaris. They are around the pole, hence circumpolar, which means that unlike the seasonal constellations that are closer to the celestial equator, it will rise and set and change throughout the year. The circumpolar constellations just sort of do a big circle around this piece of sky and are more or less available throughout the year. So that's why I said, and of course, we have our circumpolar constellations. Now I'm going to shut up. And you guys have said you are getting audio. Nina says only during a raid. Yeah, seriously, right? Your Windows always, Yeah, and then Cooper's the Windows now realizes that forcing you to update is apparently not against the law, so they're gonna do it. What are you gonna do? But you guys are getting the audio and you're getting Stellarium, so that's good enough. Looks like we have 9 viewers. That's awesome. So now that we have more viewers, I want to real fast remind you guys that this is an audience participation show. This is not the Dave's ego and I just talk about the things I want to talk about show. This is the I want to talk about the things you want to talk about show. And to that end, I'm going to finally get back to the question I pinned earlier from Matt, who is being so patient, who says, talk about the Boötes Void. So first of all, what is Boötes? Boötes, and it is pronounced that way, is this constellation right here. You can find it by looking for the Big Dipper, and then you follow the curve of the tail. See, I was going here. That's why I ended on the Big Dipper. You follow the curve of the tail, or we would say that's an arc, and you arc to Arcturus. That's the mnemonic device. You arc to Arcturus, and just for fun, you could actually arc to Arcturus and then spike on to Spica, and that's how you find Virgo. But Boötes is this constellation right here. And it's supposed to represent a herdsman. If I add the artwork, though, this guy gave him a spear and a sickle. I don't know what that's supposed to be. But you always hear it's Boötes the herdsman. And there is, it doesn't really show it in Stellarium, but there is an umlaut normally over the second O. So it's not Boötes or Boots or whatever. It's Boötes. But you will often hear people pronounce it Boötes, or here's the umlaut right here, or Boötes is how Stellarium says to pronounce it, but I disagree. It's Boötes. Plus, when I'm giving the live laser pointer tour and I talk about booties, the kids always start to laugh. And I always like to ham it up, and I go, what do you mean? Why are you laughing? I'm just talking about the big old booty in the sky, and they always laugh. But what is the Boötes Void? What are we talking about there? So, you guys know, or you may not know, in which case, throw it in the chat, that we are part of a large, swirling mass of stars called the Milky Way. Our sun is one of those stars. You can see the Milky Way in the night sky sort of tracing this arc across the sky from one end to the other. I'm going to go back in time a little bit to when the sky is darker so you can really see it, right? And you see it as this band of light across the sky. Again, I say, if you've not seen the Milky Way, highly recommend you make some kind of plan to get out somewhere dark and look up. It is your birthright as a human being. Go do it. It's literally, I wax poetic, but I mean it. I'm dead serious. It's good for your soul. But we're a part of this big swirling mass of stars called the Milky Way, and we call that a galaxy. The Milky Way is actually one of many galaxies in the universe. You may have heard of the Andromeda Galaxy. Some other examples are the Whirlpool Galaxy, which lives about here-ish. The Surfboard Galaxy, which I think is over here. And several others. The Leo Triplet, lot of galaxies in here. Now, there's a lot of galaxies in here because galaxies are not evenly distributed throughout the universe, right? The universe isn't just a sort of even, blueberry muffin where all the blueberries are galaxies, and they're just sort of all mixed throughout. It turns out that the galaxies are sort of clumpy. They're clumped together. And so you have these clumps, we call them clusters, galaxy clusters. We belong to a galaxy cluster. And then galaxy clusters tend to clump together into what we call superclusters. And then superclusters tend to sort of exist along these long chains. So you'll get a whole chain of superclusters of galaxies. Honestly, the number of galaxies in the universe is mind-blowing when you start to look into it. But if we start to map out the locations of these galaxies, we find something interesting. Galaxy distribution, maybe that'll help us out. Okay, this somewhat shows us. So this is showing us the positions of galaxies. And you'll notice these strings, these sort of loops and chains, right? So those are called filaments. You'll notice a gap right here. This gap is where we can't see because our own Milky Way gets in the way of us viewing. This is when we're looking towards the core. This is when we're looking out towards the edge where it's not quite so bad. So this hole in the data is not a genuine lack of galaxies. This is just a hole in the data. Keep that in mind. But nonetheless, as we look out here, we see all these filaments in these chains of galaxies. Now, let me see if I could find a better example map of the universe. Nope, that's the world. Map of the Virgo supercluster. Okay. So, of course, I actually want to go up one level of Virgo. This is a good picture. Here we go. This is going to show us at several levels of organization. Right, so we have the interstellar neighborhood, the Milky Way, the local group. But you see how the Virgo supercluster is a sort of big chain like this. And then these are all the local superclusters. And we have these big chains, right? But there are gaps, right? There are gaps between the filaments. And you'll notice that near to us, it happens to be that there's this enormous gap. This absolutely huge gap, right? Ursa Major supercluster. Remember how I said there's a few of those galaxies in Ursa Major? There they are, right? These names are named after constellations, and it's not because these galaxies are in the constellation in a literal sense, where you have the stars of the constellation and the galaxies in there, right? You might remember if you've ever seen Men in Black, that alien says the galaxy is on Orion's belt, and they say, they're like, the galaxy can't be on Orion's belt. Orion's belt is literally 3 stars, right? And it turns out they're talking about a cat with a thing, whatever. But in reality, it's kind of like that. When we say that this galaxy is in Sagittarius, it's not. All the stars of Sagittarius are part of our galaxy. But what we do as astronomers, and I'll try and show you this in Stellarium here, is we use, and I don't think this Stellarium, does it show? It doesn't show the borders, does it? Whoop, did not mean to do that. Equatorial grid, azimuthal grid, none of these are helping me. Okay. Basically, when we map out the sky, you have the constellations, and then borders are drawn between them so that every last square inch of that sky belongs to a constellation, and that gives us a method for breaking the sky into chunks. So when we say that something is in Hercules, what we mean to say is it's within the borders of the piece of sky that we've defined as belonging to Hercules, which would include the stars that make up the visual constellation, what we actually call the asterism, the pattern of stars. But actually everything within that border is considered Hercules, right? So that's why we say the Andromeda Galaxy, because it's the galaxy that appears in that piece of sky. So this is called the Boötes Void, because when we are looking in this direction, that is when we happen to be looking through, and I think I just realized I forgot to put the, there we go, forgot to put the visuals back up. When we say that's the Boötes Void, we happen to be looking through that piece of sky associated with Boötes. So, then what is it? Right, what is this gap? What is this thing? Well, I say the Boötes Void is misunderstood because it's really easy to go down the, and I know I'm on YouTube right now, but I'm going to blame YouTube, the YouTube rabbit hole of watching these videos where people in hushed tones talk about, you know, lizard people or whatever. And a lot of times these videos will be like weird mysteries of the universe, and they'll talk about like, what is the Boötes Void? Astronomers don't know why there's this void in the universe, like a hole in reality, da, 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 and that's all just hype. All it really is it's just a place where there's nothing. There's just nothing, right? There's no like big dark energy thing that's eating the galaxies. There's not something blocking our view of what's behind it or anything. It literally turns out that the galaxies of the universe are not evenly distributed. They're clumped together, and the Boötes Void just happens to be an oddly large gap from one chain of galaxies to another. There was a live stream recently. It was the Hubble Space Telescope, and they did a live stream on the evolution of galaxies. And it was me. I asked the question, what is the average size of one of these voids, and how empty are they really? And Okay, I just got a message from Nina. She has to step away for a second. Yeah, Nina, you got to take care of that. Um, so uh, the oh yeah, Nina was asking what are the questions I had. This was one of the questions. So I basically asked like how empty are those empty spaces really, and what's the like average size? And he basically said that the average size is somewhere around like six. What was it? It was really big. It was like 6 million parsecs or something. Which a parsec is like three or so light years. So he basically was saying that the average distance, well, I know it was bigger than that. It was like 60 parsecs or something. I don't know. I forget. But he was saying that they're really big. But what he said that was I thought was really interesting is he said that the voids between these galactic filaments are not actually devoid of galaxies. They're just very low density regions. And so, like if you look in this Capricornus void, there's a dot here, right? There is a galaxy in the Capricornus void. This galaxy is a little ways into the Boötes void. And there actually are astrophysicists who actually specialize in studying void galaxies. That's something new I learned when I was watching that live stream. Oh, sorry, I started to introduce live stream and forgot to explain. It was the Hubble Space Telescope. They did a live stream about the evolution and formation of galaxies. And just like you guys watch my live streams, I like to watch other people's live streams and learn things myself. And that is a topic I'm very interested in. So yeah, that was one of my questions. Nina wanted to know if I could bring up one of the things I asked during that live stream, and that was one of them because they had a really cool guy on there talking about galaxy formation. And very fascinating video. You should definitely check it out. It's the Hubble Space Telescope YouTube channel. Their most recent live stream on the evolution and formation of galaxies. Definitely check it out. And that was one of my questions. And the other question I asked was about the formation of the bar feature, and I can get into that in a second. But Matt, hopefully that helps to answer somewhat your question about the Boötes void. As it's essentially just a big gap from one filament to the next. And this picture makes it look like the observable universe is just a swarm of bees. But as we notice, there is this large-scale structure to it. Looks like I'm getting some messages on Facebook. Let me just double-check and see if any of those are questions for me. My dad asks, am I live now? I have been for an hour. But, yep, I am live. Okay, let's see here. So, one other thing I will say really fast, though. I actually find these voids really interesting. And it's one of those things where, you know, it's funny. Every so often I'll meet somebody that, like, when I start talking about space, they basically say, like, it freaks me out or whatever. And I find that to be, like, a weird reaction because, yeah, these things are really huge and everything, but they can't hurt you necessarily. Or usually can't hurt you. Thinking about the size of the universe doesn't freak me out or scare me in any way. It does make me feel very, very tiny. This kind of freaks me out. This gives me a little bit of that because when I just imagine in my mind, like having a hypothetical spaceship that can just smash through the speed of light, and imagine traveling from the Shapley supercluster to the Boötes supercluster and going through this void. Imagine the vast, vast, vast swaths of just nothing. Absolute nothing that you're traveling through. Like, to imagine that much nothing is difficult, right? And like, I just think to like, when we look up, we see stars because we're in a galaxy. If you left a galaxy, you would probably see a bunch of smudges because you'd see all the other galaxies. And I imagine if you were traveling across the Boötes void, those smudges would become so faint. Would you ever, like, I wonder if, you know, with the way that light falls off over distance with the inverse square law, I wonder if you could travel far enough into the Boötes void where you could literally look in all directions and just not see anything. And the universe would appear to be devoid of anything but you. Like, it would appear as if the universe no longer exists. I wonder. I would have to look into that and find out based on the inverse square law. But I have to imagine it would be the case because even within our supercluster, you know, just looking up, a lot of these galaxies, we can't see them because they're too faint, and we're within the supercluster. So I imagine even in the Booty's Void, even maybe with a telescope, it might be difficult to even detect any galaxies from within the heart of this void. And you would look like you're just utterly alone in the universe. And that actually does give me a little bit of that sinking feeling, that existential doom kind of a thing. Just imagining that, what it would be like to travel from one of these to the other and go through the nothing on the way there. I just think that's something. I don't know. I feel like there's something there. Cooper says, plot twist, the Minecraft void of the Booty's Void. I don't know much about the Minecraft void. Apparently there's like a thing in Minecraft. Let's see here. Rip Internet Explorer. Yeah, apparently, since we were talking about Windows earlier, Internet Explorer is officially gone, apparently. So, rest in peace, Internet Explorer. Let's see here. Jeff Bragg, he says, I'm looking for a way to use the Street View of Google Maps and a Time Machine astronomy app to help me determine if a location would have a low enough horizon to see Mercury. I'm curious how I could overlay a Street View with the Time Machine view without actually going to the site and possibly picking a less optimal location. That's a really good question. What you would have to do is, you would basically have to use your astronomy app and figure out how many degrees above the horizon the object you want to observe is, right? So I'll show you in Stellarium what I'm talking about. So that's a really good question, actually. I don't think we've talked a lot about celestial, what's the word? Coordinates. We haven't really talked about like right ascension, declination, that kind of thing. But if you imagine a grid, this is the azimuthal grid. This is useful for measuring in absolute terms how many degrees above the horizon. For actually plotting where an object is in a more permanent sense, we use this grid, where as the time moves on, the grid moves on. Well, it's not in the software, but oh yeah, it is. You see how that's turning, right? So that an object always appears where it would appear. But for the purposes of this discussion, turn our time back here. This kind of grid, which does not move with the background, but is just an indication of how high off the ground is something. Each of these lines, I believe, represents 10 degrees. Well, actually, I'm not quite so sure about that. Let me see if I can find a place where this line is actually demarcated. Oh, it keeps throwing them into the corner of my screen. That's the problem. Okay. So right now, each of these is 10 degrees, right? So if we time travel slightly into the future and we get the moon, Saturn, let's start. You know what? I have a slider here. I can just grab that slider. Right. Jupiter, Mars. See how the planets are all rising in the east? All the planets are in the morning right now. I didn't mention that before when I was talking about what's in the sky tonight, because the planets are not in the sky tonight. And then boom, Mercury comes up and then the sun. So we really want, right? We want to catch it before the sun comes up. So you're looking at, if this is 10 degrees off the horizon, you're looking at between 5 and 10 degrees, right? 10 degrees is roughly your fist at arm's length. The funny thing is your fist may be bigger than my fist, but if your fist is bigger than my fist, your arm is longer than my arm. It actually kind of always works out for the most part. Assuming standard human proportions. Obviously, humans come in all shapes and sizes, so this may not be applicable to everybody, but generally speaking, for the human population, that's true. So if you hold your fist at arm's length, that is 10 degrees. So Mercury should be, if you were to rest your fist on the horizon, it should be between the middle and top of your fist. That's the clearance you want, right? But since I happen to know that Jeff lives in Florida, I will give you a cheat. If you want a clear view of the eastern horizon, go to the beach, right? Look out over the water. First of all, there's no light pollution out over the ocean, so even with the lights behind you, you'll find at the beach that it's really bright over here, gets darker over there. It's not perfect, because all that light's still going to mess you up, but it's okay. And for Mercury, it doesn't have to be super dark, because Mercury is a planet, and planets are fairly reflective. Get to the beach and look out over the water, and boom, there you go. So if you can get to the beach, that's going to be your best bet. Otherwise, Start looking for locations where there are no tall buildings or trees to the east of that location. Because 10 degrees, I'm going to be honest with you, is not a lot. This is what makes Mercury so difficult to observe. Mercury is not super faint, but because it orbits the sun more closely than the Earth, Mercury follows the sun. So as Mercury comes up, the sun comes up and ruins our view, right? So Mercury is only visible fairly low on the horizon because it sticks around by the sun. And so that's kind of what you're working with to try and observe Mercury, unfortunately. But my recommendation, go to the beach. The best way to do it. Let's see here. Jane says, if the universe keeps expanding, will we get to a point of seeing no stars, no deep sky objects, no nothing? Absolutely. Absolutely. This is part of the expansion scenario for our universe. So one of the things that confuses people a little bit about the expansion of the universe is we start talking about how things are going to run away faster than the speed of light. We can't see them, and people go, wait a second. Isn't that impossible? Well, no, because it's not that the object is traveling through space that quickly. What's actually happening with the universe expanding is that the space itself is expanding. The fabric of reality, the space-time continuum, is expanding, and the galaxies are being carried along with it. So the way you can imagine it is that galaxy isn't running away from us at this speed. The distance between the galaxy opens like this, and more universe sort of gets stretched out between us and that galaxy, forcing it away from us. The galaxies are also moving, though, and some of them are moving with that expansion, some are moving against it, right? But the general trend is the expansion, and it will eventually get to the point where the universe is expanding so quickly that the gap between us and the other things is expanding so quickly that as the light travels to us from that object, it's expanding and the light can't get to us. So in an ever-expanding universe, hypothetically, and we're talking literally billions, if not trillions of years into the future, everything will be moving away so quickly that we won't be able to see the distant galaxies. We'd still see the stars in our own galaxy because we're moving with them. We're taking them with us. But some models actually hold that the galaxies themselves are going to get shredded if the expansion keeps accelerating like it is. Because the expansion of the universe is accelerating. It's expanding, but it's also expanding more quickly. And so it'll literally get to the point where the galaxy can't even hold itself together against the force of that expansion. And so you would eventually get to the point where if you were an astronomer around some different star, our star will be way gone by then. But if you somehow were orbiting a star trillions of years into the future, you would not have any way to know that the universe is full of stars and galaxies. You would be justified in thinking that it really just is that star in your planet. And it's lucky for us that we live early in the lifespan of the universe, because this is literally getting on the time span of like trillions of years and hundreds of trillions and this kind of thing, where they start to track this time in what are called epochs, where every epoch is 10 times as long as the previous epoch. And then they're like several hundred epochs from now. So they absolutely mind-blowing spans of time before we would get to that condition. So really, in the scheme of things, the universe is really young right now, and we have an opportunity to observe that and see the formation of galaxies and all these really cool things. We're very lucky in that way. My dad can't seem to get this into the chat, so he sent it to me through Facebook. Like I said, feel free to get your questions to me any which way. And he says, if all of space is expanding, how can we be heading towards the Andromeda galaxy? Wouldn't the space between us and Andromeda be expanding? I feel like I touched a little bit on it just during that explanation, but I'll expand a little bit more on that. Right now, the fabric of space-time is not expanding at this astonishing rate. It's much lower than the speed of light right now, thankfully. And so the space between us and Andromeda is expanding, but Andromeda is rushing at us faster than that's happening. So you could almost imagine Andromeda is like swimming upstream to get to us in a way, right? The reality is all the space everywhere is expanding. So for anything to move anywhere, it's kind of going against the expansion in a way of thinking about it. But galaxies actually collide all the time because the universe right now, especially along those filaments, is very dense at that scale, right? So when it comes to the distance between us and nearby stars, it's a very low density situation within a galaxy. You could throw something at random and never hit a star. But the intergalactic scale is somewhat dense, with galaxies sort of all kind of piled on top of each other, and they do run into each other a lot. The Andromeda Galaxy is only 2.5 million light years away, which does sound like a big number. But in terms of the distance between galaxies, it's not that far, right? Think about the fact that the Milky Way itself is 100,000 light years across, right? 100,000 is a tenth of a million. So the Andromeda Galaxy is about 20 times as far away as the Milky Way is big. So that's not that far in the galactic scale. And the Milky Way isn't even that big as galaxies go. It's kind of big for a spiral, but there are bigger spirals and there are much bigger ellipticals. But we are heading towards the Andromeda Galaxy. It is heading towards us. And then what happens is, although when we talk about space expanding, it's kind of like when we talk about the climate, we're talking about a trend, right? So think of climate versus weather. Overall, the universe is expanding, but on a small scale, there may be small scale exceptions because other forces are at work sort of leading to that exception. So the universe as a whole is stretching out, but galaxies are massive objects and they bend space around them. That's what gravity is. And so our galaxy and the Andromeda Galaxy are warping the space around them as well. So they're moving towards each other, and eventually they'll get close enough where they will draw each other in. They'll actually pull on each other and yank each other in to merge together and form the Milkomeda Galaxy. I think it's a dumb name. I didn't name it. Luckily, all the astronomers who named it that will be long since dead by the time it happens, and whoever's alive at that time can come up with a way better name. But that is what will eventually happen. So that's a really good question, right? If space is expanding, how is it that we're running into the Andromeda Galaxy? And the answer is that we're swimming upstream, essentially. That the universe is expanding more slowly than we're running towards each other, right? So in the weather versus climate analogy, the climate right now is expansion, but the local weather is meeting up with Andromeda. But if you were to take not just Andromeda, but a survey of all the nearby galaxies and all the galaxies we can see everywhere, overall, the trend by a long shot is actually that they're all running away from us, not moving towards us. To give you guys some pictures to go with this explanation, I can show you guys some examples of what happens when galaxies collide. What was that song? This is what happens when worlds collide, right? I'm going to show you some of that. So first of all, we've got the Whirlpool Galaxy. The Whirlpool Galaxy is a couple of galaxies interacting. Now, I have often said of this galaxy that the main one is reaching over and pulling material off the other one. I have very recently learned that's not entirely accurate. Apparently, what's really happening here is that this smaller galaxy passed through the disk and came out in front of the Whirlpool. So this galaxy is actually closer than this disk that's behind it, but not by much. And you see all this material kind of coming off here, this hazy looking stuff. That is because the interaction of this smaller galaxy with this way bigger galaxy has resulted in a lot of stars getting sort of torn loose, and they're going to get pulled in by the Whirlpool Galaxy. But these two galaxies are interacting with each other, and this is something that happens a lot of times. Something will pass through another galaxy, but because of the gravitational attraction, it'll sort of go through, and it'll kind of come back and pass through again, and it'll kind of come back and pass through again. And when it does, it distorts and warps the galaxy it passes through. We're seeing the Whirlpool face on, but if we could view it edge on, it might be heavily distorted from what we imagine. It also might be responsible for some of these weird straight edges in here. Who knows? I don't know that much about it. I'm just speculating now. This is just me being a speculating guy. But we do have some other really good examples of interacting galaxies. One of my personal favorites is the antennae galaxies. Um, and a lot of pictures of it will show it up close like this, but if you get a distant picture of it, you can really see what's happening here. So this is going to be a little bit grainy. It's not the best picture, but these are actually two galaxies that just hit each other, man. And this is stars getting slung out into the void. Could you imagine like the sun is just thrown out into the universe, right? It happens. It really does. Now, luckily, this is a big source of gravity, so a lot of these stars are going to end up coming back in again and becoming a part of it. But stars really do get just thrown loose when this happens. So this is another couple of galaxies that are in the middle of becoming one galaxy. Gosh, what are some other really good I'm just going to put interacting galaxies. Also, when I clapped, was that super loud? I just realized I probably like made a super loud noise. Yeah, here's another couple of galaxies that are merging. Here's a couple of galaxies that have kind of passed through each other and they're distorting each other a bit. Here's another couple. It happens a lot. It really does. Because the universe, like I said, is actually kind of dense on the intergalactic scale. And so here's a whole, look at this. Here's a whole collection of pictures of, look, this one is like edge on and the other one's like this. And look at all this materials getting strewn around. See if I can blow that up a little bit, right? These two galaxies are interacting. These have definitely warped each other. Look at what's happening here. There's a lot. Sorry, I'm getting excited. I actually really like interacting galaxies because like it's like, oh look, a spiral, a spiral, a spiral. But when they interact, they do weird stuff. You get all kinds of cool shapes. These guys are doing some. Look at all this stuff getting thrown out here, right? So it's really not uncommon for galaxies to hit each other in the universe. I'm gonna check our chat again real fast and see if we have any more questions going on here. Yeah, this is the loudest clap I've ever heard. Sorry, guys. I did not think that went through. If I blew out your speakers, I apologize. Let's see here. Oh, man, lots of chat. Dude, I love it. You guys are getting into the chat. Kingsland, Georgia, somebody is saying, looks like it might be really good. There's a boat ramp. Cool. Excellent. Just be patient in the morning. Mercury has to clear the horizon cloud band. Yeah, unfortunately in Florida, we often have clouds over the horizon, right? We just have to let it get above that stuff. Jeff says, I've thought about the expansion. If everything is expanding, wouldn't the time between two reference points be the same, like a stretchy tape measure? That's interesting. I'm not 100% sure because Jeff does bring up an interesting point, which is that the expansion of the universe also involves time, right? The universe is space and time. So I'm not sure how the time dilation would end up playing into this idea of the expansion and our reference frame versus other galaxies, and would time start to get really weird? I don't know, and I'm always willing to admit on this show when I'm reaching the limits of my own knowledge. I don't want to just spout nonsense to you guys. I want to stay within what I know, and if I don't know, I'll be honest about that. Let's see here. Wonder if the universe will ever contract again. I never heard any astronomers say that, but everything seems to go in cycles. Your thoughts? That is an excellent question, and this actually is a question that's been addressed by astronomers, and the math and the geometry of it is difficult to explain, but I will try to give a gross simplification of what we know about that. So there was a while where there was a hypothesis that they called the Big Crunch. So there's the Big Bang, the expansion, and then they thought that the mutual gravitational attraction of the galaxies and the stars and things all kind of pulling on each other, that eventually that expansion would start to slow down, and then all that mutual gravity would start to pull in, more black holes would form, those black holes are pulling things in, and that the universe would eventually pull itself back together into another singularity, have another Big Bang, and things would be cyclical. That was one hypothesis. Another hypothesis is sort of like the Big Whimper, where the universe expands and it just doesn't ever stop. And it just expands forever, and then the stars use up their fuel, explode, die, new stars explode, die, whatever, until it just all gets used up. And all the energy content of the universe gets lost as entropy, right? Which is anytime there's an energetic interaction, You have entropy, which is heat, basically. So they call this. Eventually, you get where the whole universe is one uniform temperature. There's no more stars, no more activity, no more nothing. You don't have what you need to form anything new, and that's called the heat death of the universe. And so there's a couple of different hypotheses. How do we figure out which one is true? And it seems to actually depend on the shape of the universe. Now, that may seem like a weird statement because you think, well, if I look everywhere and I see stars, that's a sphere, right? But the thing to remember about the universe is that the universe is three-dimensional, but it's expanding. And so we can think of the universe as expanding into a fourth physical dimension. So just like I can take oh yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sitting right next to a whole pile of origami paper. So this is a two-dimensional object, right? This is a sheet of paper. And I can take this two-dimensional thing and I can bend it into a third dimension, right? And if you lived on this paper and you were infinitely flat, this paper isn't actually infinitely flat, it has thickness, but we can imagine if you lived on here and you were a perfectly flat being, you would not know that it was bent like this, right? Because if you just moved, you would move along this, and from your perspective, you're just moving in a straight line, right? You wouldn't see anything different. So if I draw a straight line on here, I can just draw like an arrow, right? Moving in this direction and doing this and moving in this direction mean the same thing to a two-dimensional being that lives on this paper. But in terms of what's going on with this paper, this and this are two different things. So is this, right? So our universe, our perception of our universe is three-dimensional, but the universe itself is four-dimensional. It expands into a fourth physical dimension, but we are incapable of directly perceiving it. And the way that the universe is going to expand and the mathematics of how it works out depends upon the shape of the universe. And when we talk about the shape of the universe, we sometimes use words like flat. We don't mean flat in the sense of like two-dimensional flat, like people who say the earth is flat, and we know it's really not, it's round. What we mean is in a four-dimensional sense, it appears to be flat in that way, which is very difficult for a three-dimensional being to comprehend what flatness is like in four dimensions. But the thought now is that the universe may be flat, it may be curved in a way that I have a hard time wrapping my head around, or it may be like saddle-shaped. And there's a way to look at the cosmic background radiation and find points on it and do some geometry and figure out which configuration it is. And I think it turns out that it's flat. And the implication, apparently, in general relativity, if you do the math, is that this means the universe will not crunch. Unfortunately, it means that the best evidence we have so far is that the universe will not come back together and repeat. It will just simply whimper out in a heat death. Another way that we know that that's going to happen is because the rate of expansion should slow down eventually and contract, but it's not. It's actually accelerating instead. And this has led astronomers to hypothesize something called dark energy, by which we just simply mean that it's a source of energy, a source which it would require some kind of influx of energy to expand the universe. It's a source of energy that we just can't observe. It's not a star, it's not whatever. It's some kind of energy that's pushing the universe out. When we do the math, it shows up in the equations like a constant, but we can't account for that constant. What's driving that? So it appears that the universe is expanding, and it's actually increasing the rate of expansion. And the question is, will that expansion slow down in reverse? That depends on the shape of the universe, which apparently is such that it will not. That's the best I can do to try and simplify it, because even I don't really understand it that well, and it's certainly beyond the scope of this channel to get into PhD level physics or graduate student level physics. People who know physics way better than me could probably explain it better than I did. But the short version is, unfortunately, it really doesn't look like we're going to get a big crunch. It looks like we're going to get a big expansion forever, and that's it. The good news is we'll all be long gone by then anyway. So as much as it really matters in our day-to-day lives, the universe is going to be here your whole life, right? But if you're curious about what's going to happen to it later, apparently, heat death. Yeah, and Cooper says it's the loudest clap he's ever heard. Man, I apologize. I destroyed everyone's eardrums tonight. What about Golgol? Is that a collision of galaxies or just a binary star? I don't know, Golgol. Let's learn about it. I'm going to try and search it here. And let's gonna bring this back. Okay, here we go. I'm going to search Golgol. Is that going to bring up anything for me? No? All right, let me try over here. I'm just going to Google Golgol and find out what it is. Hopefully that's not misspelled. Golgol. Okay, there's a football player named Golgol. That's not who we're looking for. Golgol black hole. No. And I'm getting some interesting searches. Get back to me on that, Matt. I don't know if it's a spelling thing. I'm not familiar with it and can't really comment on to what it is. Yeah, Jane says it was a great explanation, even though I was hoping for contraction. You know, that's kind of an appropriate response to learning something about reality that's a little disappointing. You know, it's like I'm hoping for this, but we got to meet reality where it is, man. I would love a big crunch. I really, really would. And I really liked that model because I really like the idea of a cyclical universe. It really helps us to better... First of all, it makes the Big Bang less weird, right? Like, why did we have this Big Bang? Oh, well, it's a cycle and it always happens. That helps a little bit. Now it's like, nope. Right? And so we have to say, well, then gosh, okay, the Big Bang is a bit more of a mystery still. It would be nice. It would be very elegant to have a big crunch, but unfortunately, it just doesn't seem like we're going to get one. David says, hi, DCC. Okay, let me explain why he called me DCC. David hangs out at a local game shop called Darby's Dungeon, which I'm about to advertise for free on my YouTube channel because they rock. I hang out there a lot too. It's a great place to go if you are a giant nerd like me. There are multiple Daves that hang out there, so we have to keep us straight. It's the... Oh, Algol. Algol is a binary star. So that's the answer to Matt's question. It's a binary. It's one star orbiting another. Yeah, in Perseus. I know the one you're talking about. I'll bring it up in the software real fast. But just want to quickly say, David, and he calls me that because there's a game I play called Dungeon Call Classics. It's abbreviated DCC. So I'm DCC Dave. He's Dammit Dave. There's a new Dave now that we got to figure out what we're going to call him. Okay, so now, what is Matt talking about right now in the chat? So he is talking about... Oh, you know what? It's a winter thing. But remember I mentioned we can time travel in this software. Here we go. And there's Pegasus. There's Cass. There's Perseus. Right? So in Perseus, there is a star. It is... Where the heck is it? Right here. Algol. Right? And as Matt points out, it is... the star that indicates the location of Medusa's head, right? Because remember, Perseus slew Medusa and removed her head. And he was asking, is it a couple black holes? What is it exactly? Because, you know, I've heard about it. What it is, it's actually a binary star. Algol is actually really cool. And I'm glad you brought it up because, first of all, some of you viewers may know this already from viewing previous episodes, and some of you may be surprised to learn that just like how the planets orbit the sun and the moon orbits the Earth, there are many stars that actually have other stars orbiting them. Stars often orbit each other, where you'll have a big star and a smaller star, or two similarly sized stars that actually orbit a space between them, called a barycenter, where they don't actually orbit like one around the other, but they mutually orbit a central point because their masses are so similar. And then we call those binary stars. Now, when you have one thing orbiting the other, there's any orientation that's possible. You could have it's here, and from the perspective of the Earth, the orbiter goes around it like this. It could be kind of coming out like this, but it could also be doing this, where every so often the companion gets between us and that star. we call that an eclipsing binary because the companion star blocks the star behind it. Algol is an eclipsing binary star. It is in the constellation Perseus, and what's really cool about it is that the companion star isn't as bright as the main star. That's usual, that's typical. The companion star is smaller, it's dimmer. So, Algol is shining away at its current brightness. This dimmer star gets away. Even though this thing is glowing, it's still not glowing as much as this thing and will block some of Algol's light. Which means that if you watch Algol over time, it actually dims a little bit and then it brightens again. And what's really cool about it is that this partner star is similar enough to Algol's size that it eclipses it to a noticeable degree. Some of these eclipsing binaries you have to use like sensitive equipment and look for like really, really subtle changes. But Algol dims noticeably. You can actually watch it with your unaided eye, and you can watch Algol over a period of let me Google it real fast. Hold on here. Algol period. 3 days. Literally 3 days. I forgot about it. It's literally a 3-day orbital period. So you can watch Algol. It's literally just 2.8 something, but 3 days. You can literally watch Algol Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and watch it get dim Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and watch it get bright again. Night after night. And it literally varies by a whole magnitude. So right here it says magnitude 2.09. It actually gets as dim as 2.09 and as bright as 3. I just Googled it. What was it? As 3.4-ish, right? So Algol, actually a really interesting star. Isaiah says, we couldn't make Perseus out before. Also, Isaiah, what's up, man? All my coworkers are joining the live stream tonight. This is awesome. I want to remind you guys, we have like 10 people here tonight. Even if you don't have a question, say hi in the chat, man. I'm just happy to see you guys are here. Because I just see a number, but I'd love to see who's all hanging out with us, man. Isaiah sits right next to me at work, and he and I have some of the coolest conversations. You guys know I'm a nerd for mythology, and Isaiah is too, man. We talk about a lot of cool stuff at work. So he says, we couldn't make out Perseus before. Yeah, so Perseus is more of a wintertime thing. Tends to come out in the wintertime. And that's when we get to look at it. That's when we get to see it. So we're going to have to wait. Perseus is not really in the sky right now. But when it comes to wintertime, we'll talk more about Perseus. Because there's some really cool things to see in this area of the sky. Such as, if you go halfway between Cassiopeia and Perseus, you hit something called the double cluster. There's 2 star clusters right next to each other. You look at it through a telescope, you get these 2 swarms of stars. It's actually very beautiful. It's really nice to look at. Oh, I still got this grid on. Let me get rid of that grid. And I am still showing you guys the thing. Yes. Another interesting thing about Perseus is one of a set of constellations that we call the Perseus constellations, because there's a whole group of constellations all right by each other in the sky, and they are all characters from the myth of Perseus. Just to let you guys know, we've got Perseus himself. We have Cassiopeia, Cepheus, and Andromeda. This is the queen and king and princess of Ethiopia. Andromeda famously chained to a rock because Cassiopeia had bragged about how beautiful she was, and a sea monster was going to eat her, and it was like the sea monster was going to destroy their city if they didn't sacrifice Andromeda, so it was like her versus the city, so they had to put her out there. Perseus frees and marries Andromeda. But also in this piece of sky we have Pegasus. Who is Pegasus? Well, you know Perseus cuts off Medusa's head. Did you know that Pegasus was born from the stump of Medusa's neck? How metal is that? But we also have in this piece of sky, if we move over, this one I always have a hard time finding. Over here, we have Cetus. You'll often hear it called Cetus the whale, but really it's a representation of the sea monster that Perseus killed when he rescued Andromeda. So, Cassiopeia, Cepheus, Andromeda, Perseus, Cetus, and this is near the zenith, so it's acting weird. And Pegasus, the winged horse, are all characters that feature in the myth of Perseus. So that is the Perseus constellations. But yeah, Algol Algol is a really cool one to observe, and there are some observing programs for the Astronomical League. The Urban Observing Program has a list of objects, and you need to actually watch Algol dim and brighten. The good news is Perseus is not difficult to see. The bad news is it's not super easy either. You have to get somewhere decent sky quality because they're not all super bright. But if I remove the lines, you'll see that this pattern of this sort of like fork pattern near the big M Perseus is not too difficult to find when you know what you're looking for. But it's just not a super bright constellation. By the way, you guys... Oh, Golgol is a very old name for Algol? Okay, wow, I did not know that. I thought maybe it was just a spelling error, but that's interesting. And even Google didn't bring that up, so that's... I'll have to look more into that, because I know that star is Algol. Well, you guys have been great tonight. Sometimes I feel like I have to like really encourage you to ask questions, because I want to answer your questions, but you guys have been asking a lot of really cool questions, and we've talked about a lot of really cool stuff tonight. We talked about the Boötes Void, the expansion of the universe, galaxy mergers, the eventual fate of the universe, an eclipsing binary star. It's been a really cool night. We have about 24 minutes left. I'll try and do this quickly because I don't want to just eat up all the rest of our time. But I do want to quickly remind everybody that I also do represent the Northeast Florida Astronomical Society. I'm on our board of directors. Also, speaking of things tonight, we've had weird technical issues, and you guys have hung out through those technical issues, and I appreciate you for it. But anyway, I'm on the board of the Northeast Florida Astronomical Society. We are the astronomy club here in Jacksonville, so if you do live in Jacksonville, you are interested in astronomy, definitely check us out. I'm going to put the website back on here. You can check out our calendar to find out what's coming up. Definitely check us out on wrong month. July 9th, we're going to be at Hanna Park with telescopes set up. And definitely check out this Rock the Moon at the Mosh. Oh, it's going to be so awesome. I can't tell you enough how cool Rock the Moon is. And if you are interested in joining us, you can do so from our website. If you live in the St. Augustine area, check out the Ancient City Astronomy Club. They're also a wonderful group of astronomers. And I just have to say, man, if you have a telescope, if you're getting into the hobby, join an astronomy club, man. If you want to get into astronomy, join a club. Because, sure, you can go online and research things on your own, and you can learn on your own, and you can get out by yourself with a telescope. But I feel like astronomy is a team sport, man. Getting out with a group of guys, you're encouraging each other, you're helping each other, you're giving each other pointers. It's the best way to get into the hobby, and you will have a whole pool of people and their knowledge to draw from. Since I joined our astronomy club, my astronomy knowledge and expertise has just shot up in terms of observing technique, and I've just become a way better observer since being a part of the club than I ever was prior. So I highly recommend it. And that's all I have to say about that. So I just wanted to really quickly remind everybody about that. And remind people that we're going to be at Hanna Park on the 9th. And on the 16th, we're going to be at the Museum of Science and History, rocking the moon. Okay, so going to double check the chat one more time. We don't have any questions in the chat. One thing I'll do with my last 22 minutes, and I actually had planned this before, like, while I wait for people to ask questions, I'll talk about this, but you guys have not let me down. So I'll go ahead and just talk about it here at the end of the stream. I mentioned that, here we go. What is a great constellation or celestial body to see in Palm Coast? I know there is light pollution, but my buddy has a super telescope. So the trick here, and I'll bring up Stellarium. The trick here is if you hop into any kind of astronomy software like this, I'm going to time travel back to tonight. Okay, so this is what we're dealing with tonight. When you're looking at this, you want to look at the size of the dots, right? If light pollution is a concern, you want to look at the size of the dots. And here is my trick for finding constellations. start off with bright ones. You know what? This might be what we talk about for the last 21 minutes because this is a really cool topic. And it's a very practical topic. And I want you guys to not just watch this passively and go, oh, that's cool. I want you guys to get out, man. Get out and look up. So when you're first starting off observing constellations, what you want to do is start with ones that are bright and easy to find and start learning to spot those. Then you can use those constellations as a guide to lead you to the more difficult ones. So there's a handful of constellations that make really good guidepost constellations. The Big Dipper is one of them. Big Dipper is actually part of a larger constellation we call Ursa Major. If I add the lines, you see there's more to it than just the Dipper. But the Dipper part is really bright. So that's a good one to start with. Learn to find the Dipper, right? And the trick here is look north and look for the Dipper shape in bright stars. And an interesting trick that I tell people, and it sometimes surprises people, is when you're first learning to find constellations, you can actually start off under light polluted skies because only the bright ones are going to get through. And so there's less distraction in the sky, right? It's easier to find the Big Dipper pattern when there's not a lot else going on nearby, right? I've been to places where I've looked and you can only see the Dipper, right? You can't see anything else. And then once you're used to finding that pattern of stars, you can more easily find it when there's more stars in the sky. Another constellation that's a good guidepost constellation is... and it's easier to find in real life than I'm finding it to be here in the software. Because it's below the horizon. That's why I can't find it. There we go. This sort of M shape or W shape, depending on where it is in the sky, Cassiopeia, that's one of those Perseus constellations I mentioned. That big M/W is another really easy one to find. Another good place to start is the Summer Triangle. 3 bright stars in a big triangle. If you look eastward tonight, you'll see that. The constellations themselves may present a challenge if you got a lot of light pollution. So you may find Vega, but you may have a hard time picking out Lyra. I'm still going to teach you how to find it, though, because there is a really cool object in Lyra. If you find Vega, you'll find these 2 stars and these 2 stars, and they form a parallelogram, right? That's Lyra. And so this side of the parallelogram, about halfway between them, is the Ring Nebula. It looks like a little smoke ring. It's kind of faint. So if you try to go after it and you don't see it, it may just be light pollution. As you can see, it's magnitude 8.75. That's not great, but it's not too bad, and it's somewhat concentrated. So as magnitude goes, it's not a difficult one. And what it'll look like is you'll be looking and you'll have these stars, and it'll almost look like one of your stars is out of focus and just blurry, right? And at first, you have to really... When you're new to deep sky observing, you may discount your observations. You might see these smudges and think you didn't see them or whatever. So it's really faint. But then if you get your telescope and you focus it, and here's the trick. Don't try to focus the nebula itself because you never will. It just is blurry. But focus the stars nearby, and sometimes it'll look like a little blurry circle. And if you've got decent observing conditions, it'll look like there's a hole going through the middle, and it'll look like a ring. It's a really cool one. Actually, why don't I give you some easier stuff to go after? So, if you find Ursa Major, we talked about Arc to Arcturus and Spike to Spica, and you can find Virgo that way, and you can find Leo. Let's see. This teapot is another good one to look for, right? Look for the teapot in the west, southwest. There's the south direction. That is Sagittarius. It's starting to go away. It's starting to set on us, but that's another good one to observe, even if you live in Palm Coast. Again, I've shown the Sagittarius teapot to people from downtown Jacksonville. And then once you find the Sagittarius teapot, take the tip of the spout and the tip of the hand of the lid, and then complete that triangle up here, right? See how I make almost not quite an equilateral triangle between the 3? That is where you'll find the Lagoon Nebula. And the Lagoon Nebula, most nebulae are really faint and difficult to see. The Lagoon is not. The Lagoon is actually fairly bright, fairly easy to see. And then If you find Scorpius, the easiest way is to find the red star Antares that's near the teapot. Look for these 2 stars. They form a sort of curve like this. Look for these 3 stars. They form a sort of curve like this. You see those 2 curves. Then you can follow this curve down and around to find the tail of the scorpion. And then you found the teapot, you found the tail of the scorpion. Halfway between the 2 and up a little bit, we've got 2 wonderful open star clusters. They're very good ones to observe. And then the other thing I'll say is if you have the patience, or like you mentioned, your friend lives there, so he's going to be there all the time. The summer doesn't have a lot of easy targets for new people, but if I... Oh, no, hold on. I'm fast-forwarding the wrong thing here. If I time travel into the winter sky, the winter sky has got it going on. And a really good one here is to look for Orion, right? If I take away the lines, it's obvious where it is. You'll see the belt, you see the big hourglass shape, right? Here's something to look for with Orion. And I don't care how dinky your telescope is, and I don't care how bad the light pollution is. I've, again, literally shown this to people from downtown Jacksonville with a pair of binoculars. You will see it, believe me. Is if you find the belt and you look below the belt, but not quite to the knees, there's another chain of 3 stars, right? So you have the belt and you have a sword hanging from the belt. The middle star of that sword is actually the Orion Nebula. And the Orion Nebula is one of the closest nebulae to us in the galaxy, so it's particularly big and bright and beautiful. It's one of the few deep sky objects where, under really good conditions, you can make out a slight tinge of color. Usually most of these objects are just grayscale. I've got a lot of really big, beautiful pictures of it, but I'm going to try and give you a more realistic expectation and show you this picture, right? That's the Orion Nebula. You can see in this picture those 3 stars I mentioned. Oop, wrong thing. Right? This right here, this is the middle star, is actually this nebula. And then this guy over here, that's that sword hanging below Orion. The observing conditions are going to determine how much of this outer stuff you see, but this really bright center, you honestly almost can't kill it. I don't care how bad the light pollution is. You'll see, and it'll look like blurry, like I mentioned, and glowy. You get somewhere dark, you see more, right? So that's another one that I would recommend for your friend that lives in Palm Coast. Let's see here. Getting back to the winter sky. I really like the winter sky. There's a lot to see, and there's a lot of very easy stuff to see. Another thing that you can catch naked eye, if you go to the right of Orion, right, you find this reddish star called Aldebaran. You keep going, you hit something called the Pleiades. The Pleiades is a tiny little star cluster, but it's big. It's actually close and big enough that you can see it with the unaided eye. You don't need a telescope, right? You can just look and go, oh, look, a cluster of stars. And it looks like a very tiny version of the Big Dipper. And it's also the inspiration for the Subaru car company logo. Subaru is actually what the Pleiades is called in Japanese. But the Pleiades is another really cool one, and you see these bright guys are what you see with the unaided eye. But if you point a telescope or binoculars at it, you start to see all these other little stars in here. It's a very, very rich, big, beautiful, very easy to find star cluster. And it happens to be part of the constellation Taurus. So if you found the Pleiades and you found that reddish star Aldebaran, if I add in the lines, you've actually found Taurus the Bull, right? The winter has, remember I mentioned the summer triangle, the winter has something we call the winter hexagon, which is Capella, Aldebaran, Rigel in Orion here, Sirius in Canis Major, Procyon, Canis Minor, Pollux and Castor. And I forgot to mention, Capella is in a thing called Auriga. It's this big loop over here. So that winter hexagon is a thing to look for, and each part of the hexagon is a different constellation. So it helps you find 6 different constellations. So that's a bunch of stuff to look for in the wintertime. And then once it's wintertime, Pegasus is going to be in a much better position, and so too is going to be Andromeda. Let me find it over here. And then our good friend Cassiopeia, that M shape, do you see how there's one tall part of the M and one short part of the M? Take the tall part, right? Shoot through that like an arrow through a bow, and you will hit Merak, this reddish star right here. Then we can move over 1, 2 stars. They're kind of faint. But this right here, Messier 31, what is that? That is the Andromeda Galaxy. Only 2.5 million light years away. If you get somewhere dark enough, you can literally see it without a telescope. It's that big. You point a telescope at it, you're going to see it. It's going to fill your view. In a light polluted area, you'll just see the core. It'll look like a blurry orb. Get somewhere dark, and you'll see the outer part, the disk. So that's another really good object to go after. And then another one is if you find Cassiopeia and then you find Perseus, halfway between the two is that double cluster I was talking about. So if you're new and you're in a light polluted area and you want some easier targets to go after, the winter actually has a lot to offer. But even in the summertime, there are some things to look at as well. So really good question there. There's 10 minutes left in the stream. I don't know how much I can really cover in 10 minutes. I was starting to mention when I was in that Hubble live stream about the formation of galaxies, there was a guy in the chat who was kind of trolling. And I started to set this up earlier when I was talking about dumb questions and how there's no such thing. This guy was asking what I would maybe consider to be dumb questions because he didn't want to learn anything. He was trolling. He was trying to just be belligerent. He was just like full of wackadoo conspiracy nonsense stuff I'd never heard of. The Hubble people actually ended up blocking him from the chat because he was just there to cause a ruckus. But it wasn't like the normal flat earth talking points. He was saying nonsense I hadn't heard before. It was new nonsense. So to just rapid fire lightning round, I'm going to destroy all of his points. Point number 1, he said the Milky Way is not a disk, it is a sphere. That's wrong. How do we know that that's wrong? Look at it. See how it's a band across the sky? If it were a sphere, it would be everywhere. A narrow band, that's flat. That's us inside of a disk looking through it, destroyed. He said that the stars are not really far away. They're actually bits of metal suspended in the magnetic field of the Earth. First of all, we've sent things out of the atmosphere and we didn't run into the stars. But secondly, we can actually analyze the light from distant stars and break it up into the visible spectrum. And that spectrum tells us what the star is made out of. So, stellar spectrum. Right? We can see these spectra, and we can see the different elements, and we can tell that this is something that's glowing because it's hot, it's undergoing fusion, and it's sending us this light. So these are clearly not bits of metal. They are big balls of plasma that are glowing different colors based on what they're made out of, with absorption lines to tell us exactly what the stars are made out of. We can also observe parallax of distant stars, where we look at it in the winter and we look at it again in the summer. As we orbit the sun and our relative position changes, its position changes slightly versus the background for some of the really close stars. And then we can use those stars as a jumping off point to figure out how far other stars are. There's a whole ladder of ways we can figure out how far away the stars are. Point obliterated. The other point that he tried to make is he said the Andromeda Galaxy is not actually a distant galaxy. It is just a planet with rings like Saturn. Here's the funny thing about that. I rest my case. This is clearly not a planet. This is clearly made out of stars. Also, we could do that, analyze the light trick with these stars as well and figure out what they're made of, and lo and behold, they're stars. It's not just a planet with rings. It is actually a distant galaxy. And then the other point that he made is that if the Milky Way is 100,000 light years across, how is it that we can even see those distant stars if they're 100,000 light years away? Because doesn't that mean that it takes 100,000 years for the light to reach us, and we don't have that much time to sit and take a picture? So that light is constantly being renewed by more light behind it. It's like saying if the St. John's River is, I don't know how big it is, but let's say the St. John's River is, 100 miles long. That's probably way off, but whatever. And let's say that the river flows at like 5 miles an hour. Wouldn't I have to wait several hours for the water to get to me? No, because there was water here and more water's coming behind it. the light that's getting to us from things that are, for example, Andromeda Galaxy 2.5 million light years away, that light left 2.5 million years ago. So I don't have to wait for it, right? The photons have more photons coming in behind them. It's not like I have to somehow wait for them to get here to take a picture of it. Point destroyed. I'm having a lot of fun doing this. So those were some of his points that he was trying to bring up about what he thinks is really going on in the universe. And rather than just simply say he's wrong, that's why he's wrong. So that I thought would be a funny thing to talk about tonight with some of our remaining time. There's 5 minutes left in the stream. I'm just going to say really fast, thank you guys so much for coming to this stream, man. This is just something I do because I love it. I'm passionate about this stuff, as you guys can tell. And this channel isn't monetized or anything. This is just something I'm doing because I just absolutely love doing it. And you guys show up. Coop says I should do an entire live stream just obliterating points. I'm going to have to get a longer list, but that sounds like fun. I might have to do that. But so thank you guys again so much for showing up. It genuinely, honestly means a ton. It means so much to me that you guys get value out of this and you want to come back and you watch it. That just really touches me, and I'm very, very thrilled that you guys are here. And I want to thank you guys so much for supporting me in this. If you guys are getting a lot of value out of this and you think this is something other people would enjoy, I can only share this so far. I posted on Facebook. I posted on all the astronomy groups I know. And that's about as far as I can go. So anytime you guys see me posting one of my events for this or anything, repost it, share it with other people. I never remember to say this. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon, all the things you're supposed to do on YouTube, right? But really, if you hit that bell icon, then every time I stream, you'll get a little notification so you can come in and watch. And just thank you guys so much for being there and watching this. And thank you in advance for telling other people and sharing it with other people. And I guess that's it, man. With the last 3 minutes, I'm just going to say good night. I'm going to hang out for 3 more minutes and watch the chat in case anything happens. But you guys have been wonderful. Jane says, great session. Be able to set up for Nephis. Oh, he was saying like maybe... Oh, that's right, because you could do a charity underneath the stream and maybe have a bar. Could you do that for Nephis? That's right. Nephis is a 501c3 educational nonprofit. So I wonder if I could, because you guys have seen how people will do live streams and they'll have a charity listed underneath. I wonder if I could put Nephis there, because Nephis is technically a nonprofit. But mainly with Nephis, we kind of just we go off of like our membership dues for donations. Although I guess there's nothing stopping people from just donating if they like the educational work that we do. That is actually on our website, by the way. You can literally go and instead of signing up, you can just hit donate now. So that would be interesting. I wonder if I could do that. Isaiah says great info. Cooper says he's gonna do more research on it. Yeah, Coop, let me know, man. Let me know what you find out. All right. Well, thank you guys again so much. I will see you again in a month when I do the next one of these, or I might see you guys sooner if some of you guys come to some of our events. And obviously, I'm going to see some of you guys at work tomorrow. So thank you again, and have a wonderful evening.